The film Rust, a Wild West-style flick starring Alec Baldwin as lead character Harland Rust, was considered a lower-budget production. Writer-director Joel Souza felt passionate about his story and worked incredibly hard to achieve funding for it. When the time came to select a cinematographer, a lot of thought was put into who to choose. The final decision came down to a woman by the name of Helena Hutchins, a talented cinematographer who Joel says was incredibly excited to work on a Wild West film. Alec Baldwin was also rather excited for this project and became one of the head producers for the film. With everything coming together, a location for the shoot was locked in. A ranch out in New Mexico that had an old-style Wild Western town built on it. This place is a popular location for Hollywood films to shoot these sort of films. Seeing as many guns were to be used during the filming, an armorer was going to be hired. To give you a very brief description of an armorer's role on a film set, they are to essentially control gun safety. The armorer is there to make sure all weapons are safe to use and are being handled correctly. They inventory, stock, and keep note of what guns go where, and it's imperative that they take this job very seriously, as guns can pose quite a danger to the people working. A 24-year-old woman by the name of Hannah Gutierrez Reed is hired into the role of armorer for this film. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, despite this being her second time working as a lead armorer, she had grown up around this role seeing as her father, Thel Reed, was a well-established and quite famous armorer who worked on many productions throughout Hollywood history. From her childhood, Hannah would spend a lot of time with her father on set, watching how he performed his job and learning to do it herself. Over time, Hannah would learn more and more about firearms, how they work, how to properly handle them, and by the time she's 24 and got this role, Thel, her father, would say that she could do the job just as well as he could. The old-style guns that were being used on the set of Rust, although being described as prop guns, were absolutely real weapons with the capability of firing real rounds. In some instances, like Alec Baldwin's hero prop, his weapon was specifically made for this project and hadn't had any prior hours on other sets. For the purpose of understanding information that you'll hear later on in the video, I'll highlight now one key duty that an armorer must perform. It is up to them to source, manage, and handle dummy and blank ammunition which can be loaded into guns. It's important to note that dummy ammunition looks almost identical to live ammunition. There are two ways an armorer can determine whether a round is live or a dummy. The first being a simple visual check. If there is a hole drilled into the side of it, the round is no longer live. The second method, if there is no hole, it's to shake them. Dummy rounds have small noisemakers placed inside of them, either BB bullets or springs. So when they're shaken, if they rattle, the individual can audibly tell that these are safe to use. When an armorer places dummy rounds into a weapon, it is their duty to shake and check each round before doing so. Turning my attention to the filming of Rust. From some accounts, the filmmaking process was said to have been passionate and exciting, and by others, it has been described as rushed and difficult. As film sets so often tend to do, days were running behind, and every second was money spent. Over the course of about 2 weeks of filming, conditions deteriorated for the camera crew, and they expressed concerns regarding both safety and their pay. The date I'll be focusing on is October 21st, 2021. The day prior, the camera crew had sent an email outlining their grievances, and the next day, they took their gear and walked, quitting the production. A new camera crew was promptly hired, with Helena Hutchins still working as the cinematographer, and most of the early morning on the 21st was spent training this new team up to speed. Despite the troubles, filming goes ahead, and on this morning, most of the work that was taking place was in an old church. Inside the church, there's a small team of people who are present, including the first AD, the camera crew, and the script supervisor. The action which was going to be filmed involved Alec Baldwin's character, who had been shot in a previous scene, and he had taken refuge inside this building.
We were preparing a shot for Mr. Baldwin's character, he was sitting in a pew. He's been on the run. He's taking refuge in this old church, and he's sitting in the pew. And what we were photographing, I'm sorry, I'm trying to avoid the word shot. We were preparing for this shot of Mr. Baldwin sitting in the pew. It was basically from his waist to the top of his head, and his action was just to pull out the revolver. And in the story, he's pointing the revolver at 2 U.S. Marshals that have come into the church.
Harlan Rust, Alec Baldwin, was going to be laying wait in this church for the lawmen that he knew were pursuing him, and I think at this point in the story, rapidly catching up to him.
The first shot was supposed to essentially be the first moment we might realize that Rust is not, in fact, as injured as we might have thought, and so it was going to be a close-up on the weapon coming out of the holster.
Was Mr. Baldwin armed with his prop gun?
Yes.
What was your understanding about whether that was a real gun or a replica, meaning a rubber gun or plastic gun?
My understanding is Mr. Baldwin always wanted to use his, what we would refer to as his hero props. So I understood it to be a real cold gun at that point. Cold gun would indicate that the armor and potentially first AD had deemed that weapon safe to be used on set. Cold referring to the fact that the trigger could be pulled and nothing would happen.
The church was, there's an enormous amount going on. A million voices, it feels like. The special effects guys are rigging things up in the roof for debris for later on. When the shooting starts, there'll be debris falling down, and there are people working the lights, there are people moving the cameras, there's a lot going on.
Helena was here, and she's doing her thing with the light, looking at him. She's doing her lighting. And people are not static on a film set. So it's a dance. And she's doing this and looking at there was an onboard monitor, and Joel is looking, and they're there, and she's doing her thing and looking at him. The actor was practicing on his own.
Mr. Baldwin?
Yeah, he was practicing.
His action was to take the gun out and point it at what had been the 2 U.S. Marshals. And he was pulling it out. I'm sure he was getting used to that action. He was in communication with Miss Hutchins about where to point the gun.
And then he drew it again, and it went off.
It was a shock. And then I heard guttural moaning, and I looked around, and my director was crab crawling backwards.
It felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat to my shoulder. I remember that distinctly, and sort of stumbling back and shouting. I don't remember exactly what I said.
Instantly, a firearm went off in a small wooden church, so the concussion, ears ringing, that moment of panic in everybody. I think the first person I made eye contact with was Helena, who was clearly injured by whatever that gunshot was, that noise we had just heard. And in fact, she was starting to go flush, and I think holding her right side. And
I distinctly remember her being lowered to the ground. People had her sort of by either side. And I still didn't quite know what had happened. Nothing made sense. I remember initially thinking, had she been startled by it? And they were sitting her down as a result, and then I saw the blood on her back.
My attention went to Joel because he was the closest to me. I think I recall Reed and Serge moving pew out of the way.
And Joel was to the left, and our dolly grip Ross was attending to him. And At that time, all the pews were still really tight up on them, so I immediately started chucking pews out of the way, and I moved the dolly, and I cleared room for them to work on Helena.
I think I yelled out that if you can't help us, get the fuck out of here.
It got very chaotic. I remember them laying me down. I remember them laying her down next to me. Although we were sort of facing in opposite directions, my head was this way, her head was that way. I remember a lot of panic. I still just couldn't figure out what had happened. I thought, was there something that had been stuck in the barrel that came out? But just nothing made sense.
There's so many thoughts. Honestly, the idea that it was a live round of ammunition that went off was just not, it wasn't computing. It wasn't.
When I hear later about how long we laid there, it felt like 5 minutes. And I remember looking over and her looking back at me. And she had the biggest brown eyes I've ever seen.
Did you speak to Ms. Hutchins when you approached her?
I did.
What did you say?
Are you all right?
Did she respond?
Yes. She said, I can't feel my legs.
And when you're ready, just tell us what happened after that. And take a break if you need to.
I'm ready. I immediately left the church to make sure that 911 was being called. And the set medic appeared.
Sorry. It's okay, take your time.
As I was going towards her, I could see the blood dripping from her back onto the church floor. And I went to the front of her to cut up the front of her shirt, to the chest area to try to find the other hole, knowing that Joel had been shot. I knew that it was a through and through, or in one side out the other.
You already suspected that it was a through and through?
Yes, because
okay.
Because of the way that Joel was screaming in pain. I knew he had likely, whatever had gone through her had gone into him as well.
Okay, please proceed.
So I put oxygen on her and I called back to the ambulance. She didn't want the oxygen on her face. She didn't want anybody holding anything on her. She was fighting.
I was directly involved in first aid with her for a number of minutes before the paramedics had arrived on the scene.
And when you say that you were directly involved in first aid with her, do you have any first aid training?
No, I was just assisting. The medic was having trouble keeping the oxygen mask on Helena's face. She was flailing and tearing it off. And
you already knew she was going to need a helicopter.
With that kind of trauma, yes. We are 15, 18 minutes from the hospital, from town. And with the way that she was bleeding, I knew she was gonna need more than we could provide, or an ambulance could provide, or Santa Fe hospitals could provide. She needed to go to the trauma center in Albuquerque.
They were trying to stabilize her. I heard them call for a life flight, so they were trying to stabilize her to get her in a helicopter and get her to whatever ER they felt was appropriate.
When you heard the gunshot and you saw these people fall, did it occur to you in that moment that it was a live round, that there was a real bullet in that gun?
Maybe not in that moment. I think it became clear when like I mentioned, I rolled Joel over, helped roll Joel over to see what very much looked like a large caliber bullet just being barely held in by his skin.
They kept talking about this bullet, and it could not compute for me. I just kept saying, you don't understand. No, this was a movie set. That's not possible. You don't get it. And they kept saying, no, it is. And I just keep insisting, you don't understand, because this is not possible. It's just not possible that there's a live round. It just can't. And then they eventually maybe grew tired of my protesting about it, because they showed me the x-ray of my back, and there was a very large bullet in it.
Prior to Helena Hutchins being taken to hospital via the helicopter, law enforcement arrive on scene. The department that responded is a rather small one, and at the time they only had 3 available officers who could get there.
As soon as we got to the movie set itself, it was chaos. There was people everywhere. Deputy LaFleur was already on scene. I didn't know where he was, and I was being directed to the makeshift church.
I have like 200 people out here, so. Alrighty, let's see if. Yes, I already called for them. I need you to know who's in charge. Everybody stops what they're doing right now. This is a crime scene. Yeah. Okay, everybody stops what they're doing, and I need the film secured by whoever's in charge of the.
Deep breath, Helena. There you go. Deep breath, Helena. Deep breath. Be okay. Good girl. Okay. There you go. Good girl. Helena.
This is Helena Hutchins. What size? Got a stretcher? Yeah.
Not me here. No.
Okay. Let me help him get the stretcher. We got it through and through on her. We went through and through.
And at some point in time, were you notified that Ms. Hutchins had passed?
Yes.
There was a gunshot entrance wound in the right armpit region, and there was a gunshot exit wound on Ms. Hutchins' back, just below the left scapula or the left shoulder blade area. It missed the major blood vessels in the shoulder area and in the arm. It entered the right aspect of the chest into the right chest cavity. It injured some of the blood vessels that travel along the ribs, broke some ribs, or broke one rib, went into the right lung, and exited the right chest cavity just adjacent to the vertebral column. It went through the spinal cord and traveled through the soft tissue of the back before exiting. There was documented in medical record there was over 1 liter of blood present in the right chest cavity when Ms. Hutchins arrived to UNMH, or the University of New Mexico Hospital. And so that indicates significant blood loss within the chest cavity, and the injury to the right lung was also lethal. The toxicology was negative for alcohol and common drugs of abuse.
Okay.
After the death of Helena, an investigation commences. Seeing as the armorer is responsible for gun safety, and according to Hannah herself, she was the one who loaded and checked the weapon in question. Hannah Gutierrez is brought into the police station for an interview.
What do you remember? Well, basically, I just we had a couple of, we had a popper pop last week. The poppers are for special effects. One just went off randomly last week, so I was like, it must be a popper. And I checked all of them myself, so I heard the shot, and Sarah was like, what was that? And I was like, must have been a popper, and I turned around, and then I heard them say medic emergency, and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, what the fuck, was it the gun? And Dave was like, yeah, it was a fucking gun. And so I was like, I walked in and I tried to see what was happening, or where the gun was, to secure the weapons on the set. And I got yelled at, and I ran out, and Dave brought me the gun, and I opened the gun up, and one of the dummies somehow had been discharged. Did you get to see any of the others? the others all had, yeah, I took them all out. They're on the cart too. They all had rings and they all had holes, and I don't understand. But that one's enough. I mean, you know, like, overall, these are some weird, like, what we're dealing with are, like, you know, explosives. There's always, like, a chance of, like, you know, safety to be compromised, and that's the issue, and that's what I'm supposed to watch out for on set, and, yeah.
But it still is a prop gun or prop.
It's a real gun.
It's a real fucking gun.
But your props. I know. I don't know. I wish I would have checked it more.
Through this interview, Hannah confirms that she indeed loaded the gun, but says that she checked the rounds carefully before placing them into the weapon. Seeing as it's confirmed that Joel and Helena were shot with a live round, law enforcement begin to look into how live ammunition could have found its way on set. They learn that dummy ammunition had come from a few different sources. There were 2 companies that supplied some dummy rounds, and a third source was Hannah Gutierrez herself. She had a personal stash of supplies that she brought from home. Interviews are conducted with everyone who was at the scene, and what investigators begin to learn is that based on the accounts of many people working, Hannah Gutierrez seemed rather poor at her job. I'll get into the details of what they said later on in the video, but for now what I'll say, the state believes that Hannah is one of the key people at fault, and the direct result of her incompetence had resulted in the loss of life. Because of this, she is charged with involuntary manslaughter and tampering with evidence. During the trial, an incredibly large amount of evidence is presented, and over the course of this video, I'll highlight what stood out the most. To touch on a few key points from the state right now, it is learned that multiple live rounds were found in different locations around the set. As well, videos surface showing Hannah not doing her job correctly, and further information comes to light that the live rounds were more than likely accidentally brought on set by Hannah. I'll play some videos that the state presented as key evidence highlighting the argument that Hannah was not doing her job properly. To review these videos and provide opinion on the quality of her work, an expert takes the stand who is employed as a professional armorer and has over 30 years' experience working with firearms in a variety of different roles.
Do you see anything concerning in this video?
And the number one thing is muzzle discipline. That stunt performer, I'm assuming that's a stunt performer right there, has got what appears to be live weapons, and he's got zero muzzle discipline. He's holding the shotgun, and if you back it up to the beginning, he points it almost directly at, I believe it's Joel Souza, right at the front, or I'm not sure who that is, but he's handling that weapon. That weapon should be turned down at the ground. So these are just examples of muzzle discipline. You never let the muzzle of the weapon cover anything you're not willing to harm. If she were present, I would ask that I would think that she would tell that performer that you need to put that weapon pointed down at the ground.
Did you see the same stunt performer back there on that patio?
I did.
And what was he doing?
He pointed it directly at the chest of the lady or the person in the white sweater, and then turned it around and pointed it at one of the other performers. And keep in mind, and this is very important, that knowing what we know now, and the reason we're here in court, is that there were live rounds on the set of Rust. So you maintain one of the first safety rules is treat all weapons as they are always loaded. And that's to mitigate any problem that might happen downstream. So you have to assume that there may have been live rounds in any of these firearms that we're watching in these videos. There were live rounds there, so imagine the concern that you would have knowing that at any point in time any of these handguns or long guns could have a live round in it. So then it makes it a lot more concerning when that double-barrel shotgun's pointed to that man's back.
Okay. Should these actors and stuntmen already have the guns in their possession if they're not filming?
No.
And where I've stopped it here, what do you see with regard to that shotgun right now?
It's pointed at the child, I say the young child actor, young actor.
And should the actors or stuntmen walk around with their live firearms in between takes?
No. Lack of control. And at the end of the day, control is how you manage safety.
Okay. Do you see Ms. Gutierrez there?
I did.
What is Ms. Gutierrez doing?
She's holding that double-barrel shotgun pointed up at her neck and face.
Why would that be concerning to you?
Never let the muzzle of the weapon cover anything you're not willing to harm. It's a fundamental safety rule.
How would you expect proper gun safety on a movie set if the armorer is not following basic gun safety?
That's a very good question. It would be hard to implement.
And what are we doing here? State's Exhibit 155.
So he went around in a full circle with the muzzle at everyone in the vicinity, and then he handed the weapon to the young actor.
In a circumstance like this, what is the responsibility of the armorer?
Just to intercede. I mean, I would have walked in, let's just assume this is the first time I saw this, and I was standing right behind where you're seeing camera. I would have saw him with the muzzle. I just said, hey, Bill, or whatever his name is. I just say, hey, Bill, listen, make sure you keep that thing slung down while I'm sitting here watching you if we're about to, do this scene. Now, if we're not about to do the scene, he doesn't even have the weapon at all, so it's a moot point. But let's assume that we're just about to film this, and I've given it and done the safety checks. And if I had seen him handing a weapon off to anyone, much less a young, underage person, that would have been the end of that. He would not have been handling a weapon anymore. In my, if anything to do with me personally. And you see the stunt performer in the rear swinging that handgun around, which what I was watching. He was actually pointing. He was talking and pointing with his firearm.
And did you just see Ms. Gutierrez come into the frame?
I did.
Does she have anything in her hand?
Could you back it up one more time, please? Okay, she's carrying the double-barrel shotgun, it looks like. Muzzle end up.
Is that a proper way to carry that gun?
It is not.
Is that a safe way to carry that gun?
It is not.
And do you have a comment on Ms. Gutierrez's handling of that shotgun that she's carrying?
She's still carrying it by the muzzle end.
I'm getting up. Right. Then when he drops his arm, Helena get out. He drops his arm. That means Brady's close. I'm going to start to really get up. Okay.
Do you see anything concerning here?
He's doing what we saw previously in one of the other videos with the stunt performer. He's using the weapon as a pointing stick, as if it's his finger.
Here we go. Ready. And action. Go!
Is it important when you're on a movie set and you hear the word cut, is it important that the actors not continue to fire the guns?
Yes.
Cut! Motherfucker.
So when the word cut is said, everything should cease immediately.
So in this instance where Mr. Baldwin was firing the gun after the word cut, is there anything that you would have done?
I would file that under the category of going, as the old saying goes, off script. He went off script there and fired for whatever reason that I guess he felt he needed to, but I would have probably said something to him about that as well.
Afterwards?
Afterwards.
Okay. Obviously, Ms. Gutierrez is not as experienced as you are. Does her lack of experience, in your opinion, change the amount of responsibility she has as the armorer on the movie set?
Once you take on the responsibility of safety for another person, you take on a responsibility of making sure that you do what's necessary, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's not in your best interest. And if that isn't something that you feel capable of doing, then you should never step into that position. And it's unfortunate, I feel, that Ms. Gutierrez's experience level on this film may not have worked in her favor. It was the best thing I could probably say there. However, she took the position, and therefore these people on the movie set depended on her guidance and her professionalism to keep anyone from being harmed. and convenience isn't an option at that point.
In addition to these videos, the state goes into detail about many other elements of gun safety regarding Hannah's work on the set of Rust.
Do you have any recollection of a single time that you saw her rattle a dummy?
I can't recall.
Were you guys working pretty closely together?
Yes.
And you don't recall ever seeing her do that?
Not that I can remember.
Do you ever recall any safety checks where you saw Ms. Gutierrez shake rounds before loading them into the gun?
I never saw anyone shake around, no.
Thank you.
In my experience, you always make sure you check if a gun is clean or how many rounds are inside the gun. But what you can do is you open the cylinder, and this is speaking with single action pistols, and you take the cylinder out, and because blanks have a lot of debris that comes out with the gunpowder, you check the barrel sometimes to just see if anything is lodged in there, because that can shoot out with the gunpowder. And you open the cylinder and you can look down the barrel, and if the cylinder is open, it's impossible to be shot or anything bad happen, because you can see straight through and you see daylight through the barrel of the gun.
And what caught your eye about the way that Ms. Gutierrez did those barrel checks?
When she looked, the cylinder was closed.
And so in your experience, when she looks and the cylinder is closed, what would she be able to see?
Nothing.
Did you testify that you saw Ms. Gutierrez provide actors with weapons without conducting a safety check?
That is correct.
Would she take the time to check every round to make sure that it was inert?
No.
During the filming of Rust, Hannah was working closely with the props master, a woman by the name of Sarah Zachary. The reason these two women were working alongside one another so intimately was because Hannah was actually hired to work two separate roles on set, the armorer and a prop assistant. According to production management, the way this would work was that they had scheduled armorer days where guns would be present. On these days, Hannah would be the armorer and would receive assistance from Sarah Zachary to help her accomplish her duties. And on the other days, where no guns were present, she would work in the props department as an assistant to Sarah. A few days before the shooting happened, there were two incidents where a firearm accidentally discharged, and these happened less than an hour apart. The first one involved Sarah when she was helping with armorer duties, and the gun she was loading went off.
Can you just explain to the jury what the circumstances were of that accidental discharge?
Yes. So we had a gunfight between a few different actors where I was helping to load blanks, and when we were going in for another take, I had to unload the blanks that were already discharged and fill the gun with new ones. And as I was loading them and locking the gun back into place, the hammer slipped from my thumb, and one of the rounds went off. There is no projectile, so it was just a loud pop and a flash.
Did you receive any training from Ms. Gutierrez so that you would be able to competently load and unload the guns?
Briefly, yes.
When you say briefly, how much training did you receive from Ms. Gutierrez?
A few minutes.
Do you recall where Ms. Gutierrez was, the reason that you were doing it and not her?
I believe at that point she was in the bathroom.
So I was like, I heard there was like a misfire or something, and she's like, yeah, I was loading it, and she's like, and it just went off. And I said, because I had to train her how to put them in and make sure that the hammer goes down gently enough. And so she was loading it, and I'm not exactly sure what happened. Like I said, I was in the bathroom, but guns don't just go off like that. And if you're loading it, it's most likely that you made a mistake just loading it and that the hammer came down too quick.
Okay.
And, you know, when you're in a rush, that can happen. It hasn't happened to me, but I can understand it happening.
We were outside of the character Rust's cabin, and I don't know if she was loading or unloading a handgun, but unannounced to any of the crew, that firearm discharged. So we consider that a negligent discharge.
When you heard the gunshot go off, why was it frightening? It's a Western. You know, we've heard that there's lots of guns and blanks and...
Because it doesn't happen.
What doesn't happen?
Guns do not just go off on a film set.
In your career, do you recall having that ever happen to you?
I do not.
How many accidental discharges occurred while you were working on set?
2.
And do you recall if they were the same day?
They were the same day, same set.
And can you describe what the other accidental discharge was that happened?
Hannah was prepping the stunt double in the cabin with that firearm, and again, unannounced to any of us outside the cabin, that firearm was discharged.
Next thing I know, boom, inside of the fucking thing. And I already told him this gun was hot. I know for a fact I did, and we were doing that scene all day, so this man knows this gun is hot. And then I go in there and I said, what the fuck are you doing in here? And he tells me, he's like, I don't know, it just went off. And I was like, well, it's a lever action rifle, and that's not really how that works, bud. You know. So, pissed him off a little bit, but I said, all right, be careful in here. Thankfully, we were doing that scene pretty much all day, so I think a lot of camera had their earplugs in, but...
It was inside when it went off, though?
It was inside of this, little shack that they were in, and most of the camera crew was in there at the time.
How much time passed between the first of these accidental discharges and the second?
My recollection is they were within an hour of one another.
And in your experience on other movies with armorers, are accidental discharges common?
No.
Have you ever experienced an accidental discharge on another movie?
I don't know that I have.
After both of those accidental discharges, what happened? So, this day is kind of when Sarah and I butt heads. Because ultimately, like, after hers, I was livid. And then after that one, I was, like, furious. And so I tell her, I was like, no, dude, I was like, what just happened? And, like, I'm getting heckled by the fucking stuntman at this point. I said, no, dude, that, like, wasn't okay. We need to talk to production about this because a lot of people are probably pissed about that because it happened within 10 minutes of each other, 2 of them. And I was like, oh, my God. I literally screamed out, what the fuck is happening? But... So I told Sarah, I was like, hey, we should probably talk to production about that. And, like, Sarah is embarrassed at this point. She's shaking. Her face is, like, pretty mad. And she's not really responding to me too much. I said, well, like, you know, you did that while loading it. And I was like, so I'm not sure if people are going to want you loading the guns anymore. And she was like, well, yours just went off in there after you loaded it. And I said, yeah, well, I can't be responsible for every dickhead fucking stunt guy that gets a hold of the gun and doesn't understand the concept that it's hot.
Right.
You know?
I can't be responsible for every dickhead fucking stunt guy that gets a hold of the gun and doesn't understand the concept that it's hot. Her entire job is to be responsible for exactly that. And when she took this job, she agreed to that responsibility. There is no exception in the law for you're young. The exception in the law does not exist. The law treats everyone the same, and it must.
This brings us to the issue of, where did the live rounds come from? There is speculation from the defense that dummy rounds provided by a man named Seth Kenny, the owner of PDQ Props, a company that supplies prop guns and dummy ammunition to movie sets. They say that Seth could be the source of the live ammunition. It is believed by the defense that the live rounds could have come from him because in a movie shoot prior to Rust, he was actually training actors using live ammunition. When he was done, this live ammo was boxed up and sent back to his property for storage. Law enforcement recovered these live rounds, and they tested it. And although the rounds didn't match with the ammunition found on the set of Rust, it doesn't prevent the defense from placing doubt on his business as a whole. To counter this, the state would highlight that during Hannah's second interview with police, she actually provided them with a photograph of a box of dummy rounds that was found at her house. This box is identical to the one that, by her own words, she was pulling dummy rounds from the day a live round was loaded into Alec Baldwin's gun. Furthermore, no boxes located at PDQ Props containing 45 long Colt dummies were found with this style of label. The actual box that Hannah was pulling rounds from on the day of the incident is sent off for testing, and one more live round is found mixed in with the dummy rounds.
Let's take a moment to talk about whether or not the live rounds found at PDQ, which are photographed there on the left, match the live rounds found on the set of Rust. You don't have to be a gun expert to look at those and see they simply do not match. Even though you could look at those rounds and fundamentally understand that they are not the same, the the sheriff's department sent them to the FBI for testing so that we could actually have some experts confirm what we can see with our very own eyes.
Getting closer to the incident on the 21st, through witness interviews, the state learns that after Hannah loaded the gun with what she believed to be dummy rounds, she handed the weapon to her first assistant director, Dave Halls. When she did this, she didn't do an adequate safety check in front of him like she's supposed to. Then, she left the gun unattended and exited the church. When Dave Halls takes the stand, he goes into a little more detail about how this unfolded.
Miss Gutierrez take the gun from Mr. Baldwin, but she appeared back on my left-hand side and she said that she had put dummy rounds into the revolver.
And at that point in time was another safety check done.
She opened up the latch to the revolver. I recall seeing 3 to 4 what I believe to be dummy rounds.
Is the safety check sufficient if the armorer already has the gun loaded, brings the gun to the assistant director, opens the loading gate, and spins the cylinder, but doesn't remove any of the dummies?
And no, you could actually look at it in a way that's actually worse than not even looking at it at all, because you have opened the cylinder, opened the latch on the side of the cylinder, you have spun the cylinder, and you're looking at it from a rear view. So all you see is the end of the back of the base of the bullet, right, of the round. So you cannot identify anything as to what type of round that is in there, except that there are rounds in there. So what you've done effectively is identify that you have a fully loaded weapon, but have no idea what type of rounds you have in there.
A month after the incident, Hannah Gutierrez is brought in for a second police interview, this time with her lawyer present. When the lead detective takes the stand, she would highlight some things that came up in this interview, which are quite alarming in regards to how Hannah was performing her job.
And as I picked them up, they were jingling. So that indicates that they were dummies.
Okay. Had you seen the box prior to that point?
I hadn't really noticed that box prior to that point.
Based on your investigation, is it possible to determine that every round in a box is a dummy round if you just shake the entire box?
No.
Because if you just shake the box, how can you tell?
I mean, yeah, you could more than likely hear some of them jingling, but it wouldn't be feasible to point out that every single one of those had BBs in it.
Based on your interaction with Ms. Gutierrez during this part of the interview, I just want to be clear. Was it your impression that she claimed that this was a box she'd never seen before?
Yeah, that's what she stated.
So it was a box she'd never seen before and she just decided to grab it and start loading guns with it?
Yes.
After shaking the entire box?
Yes.
Not each round, the box itself?
Correct, just the box.
All right.
I'm walking in with this belt right here, and I'm walking in holding the four no primer cap ones and some extra ones too. And there were 2 that could have been shaken, so I'm shaking them both as I walk in. And I walk in and I put the four no primers in there.
Corporal, Did she physically demonstrate that she was shaking 2 dummies at one time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Despite saying in her previous interview that Sarah Zachary is a nice Christian girl and that she doesn't believe anyone would secretly plant live ammunition on set for any malicious reason, in this second interview, the theory changes, and Hannah begins to speculate that possibly someone may have been involved in sabotage. She muses that this is potentially how the live round ended up in a box, seeing as the gun cart which she obtained ammo from was left unattended for extended periods of time. Hannah indicates that maybe it was the disgruntled camera crew that wanted to mess up the production, or possibly Seth Kenny might have done it because he was upset with Hannah personally following a disagreement they had a few days prior. Sarah Zachary is suggested as a potential suspect because she also works as an employee for Seth, and after the accidental discharge from a few days prior, Hannah and Sarah were not on good terms.
When do you think somebody would have had the opportunity to go to live round? Hard to speculate on that exactly, but, that gun, it was on Alex most of the day, and then also it was on top of our cart sometimes too, and there were times when I was gone to the bathroom, and like I said, I got a key, and I tell the girls to watch the cart and everything, but sometimes the girls get distracted by the actors. So, honestly, that box was sitting out all day. And when I picked up that box, I heard it jingle, like the whole box jingle. So that, to me, was saying, this is a box of dummies, still check everyone for the jingle. But, so definitely some of those were 100% dummies, and I don't know, someone possibly could have done something at lunch. The box could have already had some live one in it in the morning, and you probably wouldn't have noticed, unless you picked it up. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure when that could have got in there, and honestly, it could have been in there from the beginning of it. I will say right now that, Seth supplies all the boxes, and then on top of that, I was beefing with Seth at the time. I don't really know, I don't want to speculate, but he's also been acting pretty weird towards me personally. And then...
So that was that come after the incident, right?
Yeah, well, no, we had a whole ass argument, and we weren't talking during this incident. We were in a full fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Up until this point of the interview, the extent of Hannah's knowledge is that there was only the one live round which was directly involved with the shooting, and most of her speculation on who could have placed it there comes down to that one round being found in that one box on the gun cart. Unknown to her, police had discovered numerous live rounds located around the set, and during this interview, this information is revealed to her.
So the thing is, there are other live rounds that were found in other various places.
Really?
Not in that box.
Really? Where were they found?
I'll go through the pictures because I can't. There's so many different areas, and I'm going to go over that with you guys, okay?
Yeah, that's news to me. Wow.
So they weren't all in that box.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh.
Do you have any speculation on that?
No.
Okay. Take a deep breath. That's just, like I said, I want to be honest with you guys about, about where we're at and what we've found, okay? We have the spent casing from Alec's gun.
Okay.
We have the one that was in that box.
Yeah.
Which we were told that that this was the box that you were pulling from.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. We have the two on the top of the cart.
Yeah.
Just
so those that might have been from the box.
In the bandolier, in the top of the cart.
Right.
And one in Alec's bandolier.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one that's unsure that was in that blue Sharpie box.
That's crazy.
Why would there be live ammo on the set? I have no idea. At this point, it's kind of seeming like somehow these were mixed in.
She had six live rounds on that movie set. The earliest date that I can track them for you is October 10th. We know that they were there from the 10th to the 21st. 6, and she failed to ferret them out for 12 days. What that means is that she wasn't shaking any dummy rounds. She wasn't testing anything. None of that stuff that her lawyers want you to think was so difficult. None of it was happening. It didn't happen the entire time. She didn't find any of them.
It's here that I'll put a focus on the man Seth Kenny. As you heard earlier, Seth Kenny is the owner of PDQ Props, and he provides weapons and dummy ammunition to film sets. I did touch on it briefly, but the reason he is heavily suspected by the defense as being the one who provided the live rounds comes down to a few key points. 1. Seth had been working with live ammunition of the same caliber on the film shoot prior to supplying his box of dummy rounds to Rust. 2. Seth stored that live ammunition on his property alongside his blank and dummy ammunition. 3. They argue that his location was in a pretty messy state, and it would have been easy for live ammunition to mix in with the dummies. 4. Seth had motive to want to ruin Hannah's career as he was in a disagreement with her at the time of the incident. And 5. It is learned that directly after the shooting, Sarah Zachary, the props master, who is also an employee of Seth Kenny, she had a phone call with Mr. Kenny right after the incident, and although it is unknown what was said on that call, she went on to immediately unload and dispose of rounds from other firearms on the set. This I will get into more detail on when it gets to the defense's side of the video. For now, the focus will center on why the state believes Seth did not provide these live rounds. The main reason they argue is because of physical differences between the live rounds on set and the live rounds at Seth's property. Not only did they physically look different, but when the rounds were disassembled, the gunpowder within them also did not match. Seth would explain that he had only provided one box of dummies to Rust on October 12th. The box of rounds that were provided, he actually hand-wrote a label of what they were before sending them off. This box is completely different to the one live rounds were found in, which Hannah confirmed she was pulling from, and it is argued that because she had an identical box at home to the one in question, the live rounds more than likely came from her. As his testimony moves forward, Seth would explain in detail how he went about preparing the rounds that he sent off to Rust on October 12th. Initially, he noticed that they were coated in some sort of gooey substance, which prevented them from rattling correctly. Because of this, he went to the effort to clean and polish each dummy round individually.
And so I noticed that some of they just didn't sound safe to me. They just didn't sound like I wanted, Hannah and Sarah to have to be dealing with something that seemed odd. And so I selected, before I sat there and polished each dummy round, I had to make sure, one, it rattled before I spent a minute polishing the round. If we're talking about a box of 50, plus writing a label on both ends, I sat there with this box for an hour. So they got rattled before they got polished, and then re-rattled to make sure they would rattle without issue, and then individually inserted into the box.
Was there anyone else who provided 45 long Colt dummy rounds to the set of Rust?
Yes.
Who's that?
That was Hannah.
Have you seen photos of the live ammunition that was found on the set of Rust?
I have.
Did you possess any ammunition that looked like that?
No.
Did you provide any live ammunition to the set of Rust?
No.
At some point in time after the incident on the 21st, did you become aware that you were perhaps being blamed?
I started to sense that there was efforts to redistribute blame.
Did you see a morning news show?
I have seen one.
I'm talking about a morning news show where Mr. Bowles and Mr. Reed were the guests.
Yes, I do remember that.
And did anything about their statements on that morning news show cause you to believe that you were perhaps being targeted or blamed?
This morning, for the first time since the fatal shooting on the set of Rust, the father of armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed speaking out to defend her.
As a father, are you concerned that Hannah could go to jail?
No. The sheriff's department will get to the bottom of this. I'm not worried about that at all.
Hannah was not in the church at the time. Her attorney saying she gave the gun to Assistant Director Dave Halls.
She had two duties, prop duties and armorer duties. She had spun the cylinder. She had given it to Halls. She had shown him each of the 6 rounds. Halls was going to take custody of that weapon. He was inside the church then. Hannah was outside the church having to do her prop duties.
Were you at all concerned about Hannah having to take on the role of armorer and prop assistant?
I didn't like it, and she complained about it too. If there was a live round placed there, she would have found it.
You have confidence that Hannah would have checked that gun one more time had she been in the church?
She knows what to do.
Because that's what you would have done.
Yeah, she does the job as good as I do now.
No one disputes that Hannah loaded Baldwin's gun, but her attorney and her father say they believe sabotage was at work.
Sabotage is the most likely probability.
Do you believe sabotage was possible on the set?
Oh, yeah. A lot of motive there.
Somebody wanted to cause a safety incident on set. Nobody wanted anybody to be killed. We developed evidence of motive for that, why they might have wanted to do that, why Hannah might have been a target. And that's all gone to the sheriff. So we're asking for that to be completed before any decisions are made on charging.
Knowing Thale and having been friends with him for a few years at that point, I understood who he was and how much he loves his daughter. So I felt like what was about to happen, that was the very beginning. And that was essentially to ultimately try to pin the live ammunition on the set of Rust, that somehow it came, through me.
Wherever the live rounds came from, the state would argue that should Hannah have performed her job to an adequate standard, the live ammunition would have been discovered and never placed into a weapon. The state presents an image that was taken on set on October 10th, 2 days before dummy rounds from other suppliers had been delivered. This photo depicts Hannah sitting near some ammunition whilst holding a gun. Based on review of the live ammo found, the state believes that one of these bullets in the photo is a live round, and this photo is used to show that she had live ammunition right under her nose, which was failed to be identified as a hazard. A big part of the defense's argument is that Hannah was torn between 2 roles, seeing as she was hired as an armorer and a prop assistant. It is argued that production constantly pulled her away from her armorer duties, which caused her to feel pressure, be rushed, and ultimately not be able to perform her safety duties to the best of her ability. The state would of course address this argument.
You and Ms. Gutierrez were both doing some level of armorer duties. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And you and Ms. Gutierrez were both doing some level of prop duties, is that right?
Yes.
Did Ms. Gutierrez ever express concerns to you that she didn't have enough time to focus on her armorer duties because she was so busy doing prop work?
I don't recall that being an issue.
Did it seem to you as her co-worker that she was stretched too thin and didn't have enough time to do her armorer duties?
No.
At any point in time, did Ms. Gutierrez indicate to you that she did not have enough time to focus on her armorer duties because she was busy doing props?
No. The reverse would be true. So she focused more on her armorer duties and less on her props duties.
Ms. Zachary, I'm gonna take you to October 21st of 2021. Was there a delay in filming that morning?
Yes.
And when there's a delay in filming, what do you do? Are you still busy doing props?
I was coordinating with the art director about props for later that day, but otherwise we weren't really actively working.
Given that they weren't filming anything, was Ms. Gutierrez very busy?
No.
So would she have had time that morning to do whatever she needed to do?
Sure.
After proving that Hannah had 3 free hours in the morning where she could have checked her dummy rounds that she was going to be using for the day, the state would put an in-depth emphasis on the overall inadequate work that Hannah provided in her armorer role. This was a running theme throughout the many witnesses presented, and I've put together a little edit that shows a highlight of what people had to say about her work.
On 2 separate instances, I came across the cart where they moved the guns around. The armors would bring them to set and set their cart up, and on 2 separate instances, I came across that cart basically unmanned with nobody around it.
I seen guns and ammunition on a small cart that was left on the set periodically.
When you saw them on her cart, was she present?
Not all the time.
And was that unusual?
Everything about the cart was unusual. It was like that drawer in your kitchen where you just put stuff that doesn't really go anywhere else, the random things, and you go in to look for something, and it was messy. To me, it looked different than what I was used to.
I recall walking by her cart a number of times, and firearms and or bandoliers or ammo belts being left out on the cart unsecured.
In your experience with armorers on movie sets, did that seem unusual to you?
Yes.
It's just not something you see normally on a set. It felt wrong, and it looked, anybody could have done anything they wanted to those weapons.
It seemed inappropriate and out of the ordinary that those firearms weren't secured.
Can you recall ever seeing guns and ammunition laying out unattended on a movie set?
No.
In your experience, should the armorer ever leave a gun with anyone else and leave the area?
Not a live weapon, no. And when I say live, I mean a weapon capable of firing a round or a blank.
I don't know that I've ever seen an armorer pull loose ammo out of a fanny pack. Typically, my experience with armorers is any ammo they use, blanks or dummies, comes out of some sort of container, whether it's a labeled box or some other plastic type ammo container. So
what I have experienced on film sets is that the armorers are very quiet, focused, and very organized. Everything is very organized.
She wasn't necessarily as serious or professional as I'm accustomed to with the other armorers that I've worked with.
Gabrielle Pickle, to her credit, tried to get Ms. Gutierrez to implement a check-in and check-out system because 2 people had complained that there was a shotgun left unattended. People on the set were complaining about her. Did you suggest to Ms. Gutierrez a way of remedying the problem of leaving firearms unattended?
Yes.
What did you suggest?
Some type of logging system, check in, check out.
And did she agree to a check-in, check-out log system?
No.
Can you explain to us how a rifle was lost or what you recall about that?
We were doing a stunt in the middle of town, and after we were done, I was asked if I've seen a rifle anywhere on set.
Do you know whether the rifle was found?
I don't. Every other show I'd been on previous to that, the armor would hand the gun right before the scene and take it away right after.
And that was not Ms. Gutierrez's practice?
Not that I can recollect.
I would notice our armorer hand the guns over to the actors, sometimes checking them, sometimes not. Generally, once the scene is over, you would remove the weapon. The armorer would remove the weapon from the actor and re-secure it until it is needed again. On Rust, that did not happen a good majority of the time. The actor still remained in possession of the weapon, whether it was in their holster or in their hands.
How did Ms. Gutierrez compare to the other previous 24 armorers that you worked with?
I found her to be inexperienced and did not present in the way that I'm used to seeing professional armorers, union armorers, on a film set. It was different.
Did you find her behavior on the film set to be professional?
I did not.
The final piece of the state's evidence that I'll show would be how Hannah immediately reacted to the information that people were injured on her watch.
2 occasions after this incident where a helicopter had to come in, ambulances had to come in, Ms. Gutierrez, on 2 occasions after that incident, spoke about her concerns about her career.
I think that one's open.
Do you need to come with me?
Yeah, I'm just gonna stand facing opposite, okay?
Is there like a closer cop car you guys can put me in or something?
I mean, the closest one that I can put you in is one of the ones that's like the unmarked one.
I just kind of wish that any of my coworkers could stop seeing me because I already feel super bad.
Okay.
I just want to get the fuck out of here and never show my face in this industry ever again.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Oh, I would.
How long have you been working here?
Just a month.
Just a month?
Yeah. I've just been doing this job for like 9 months now.
Okay. How old are you?
24. I'm like the only female armorer in the game, and I just fucked up my whole entire career.
Have you studied armory, or did you go to classes, or how did you get into it?
My dad's one of the best armorers in the entire world, and he trained me, and I'm a fucking failure.
Did she mention to you that she was extremely worried about Ms. Hutchins and Ms. Hutchins' death?
No, ma'am.
What specifically did she say to you when you were in her room with regard to any concerns that she had?
She was concerned about her career. She was concerned about being prosecuted because somebody got shot.
All right. At the time that you spoke to her and she indicated concerns about her career, what was happening?
Chaos. Everyone was trying to figure out what happened.
Were people screaming?
It was after Joel screamed.
Wow. That gives you an idea that you are dealing with someone who is not particularly concerned about the health and safety of others. And her job was to be concerned about the health and safety of others. But on that day, she's just thinking about herself. Now, let's move over to our tampering with evidence charge. During the time that the two of you were both working on the set of Rust, did you get to know her?
Know her? No. I had a chance to sit with her once or twice, but not really get to know her.
Were you present at the hotel the evening of October 21st, 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
And at some point that evening, did you go to Ms. Gutierrez's hotel room?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
Court and I forget what his name was, but the set steward were in her hotel room and needed to go to the store to get something and did not want to leave her alone, so they called me and asked me to come up to her room.
Okay, and did you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Did anything unusual happen when you left Ms. Gutierrez's room?
Yes, she asked me if I could hold on to something for her. I said yes. She put it in my hand, and I walked out as there was a knock on the door.
And after you left the room, did you look to see what she had placed in your hand?
Yes.
And can you describe, without making any assumptions about what it was, can you just describe what you saw in your hand?
Yes. It was a clear Ziploc baggie with a green small Ziploc baggie inside, and there was powder inside the green baggie.
What color was the powder?
White.
And Ms. Smith, how old are you?
I'm 51.
And when you were a younger person, did you have an opportunity to use the drug cocaine?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a recovering addict.
Are you familiar with what cocaine looks like?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the way that cocaine is packaged?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on that experience, what did you believe to be in the bag?
I believed it to be cocaine.
And what did you do with it?
I threw it in the hallway trash can before even going downstairs to my hotel room.
And why did you throw it in the hallway trash can?
Because, like I said, I am a recovering addict. I can't, first and foremost, have it in my possession. And second, I was really very offended, and I didn't want anything to do with the situation anymore.
After October 21st passes, did you receive any text message communications from Ms. Gutierrez?
Yes. Several.
And generally speaking, what was the theme of those messages?
I want my stuff back.
So both of these messages appear to be outgoing from the what's identified as the owner of the device, Hannah Reed, to a contact named Becca Santa Fe. And it says, "Hey, I might be coming to Albuquerque tonight and was wondering if I can get that stuff." The next message, "Becca, call me when you get a chance." This message was sent on October 23rd, 2021 at 6:20 p.m. The message states, "He gets in 30 mins or so. Becca hasn't texted me back at all, and I'm trying to get my things from her tomorrow." This one, the top message, is from Hannah Reed, owner, to Courtney Santa Fe. And the message says, "Could Becca maybe drop off my things to y'all? Since I haven't been able to catch her. Hey Becca, mind if my brother-in-law picks up my things from you after Thanksgiving? He lives in Albuquerque."
Other than the bag containing the green bag containing the white powder, did you have anything else that belonged to Ms. Gutierrez?
No, ma'am.
When Mr. Bowles gets up here and says, "I can't prove to you that it's cocaine," remember that when people destroy evidence to avoid prosecution, you don't have the evidence that they destroyed. They got rid of it. It's gone. That's the point to the charge.
This now brings us to the defense's side of the argument. I'll start it out with an OSHA investigation. OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, a government body that investigates whether productions, companies, and work environments are set up in a way that is safe for the people working there. OSHA would independently go on to perform their own non-criminal investigation into the happenings of Rust production, and they found that management were at fault as they had breached safety protocols. In turn, Rust Productions were fined $100,000. The defense would put the OSHA lead investigator on the stand to report his findings.
So the investigation is to, if possible, find a root cause for whatever may have led up to the incident. Sometimes things are not so simple and they have a lot of complicated factors that contribute them to occurring. In this scenario, the investigation is to try to identify what led to the accident occurring despite whatever measures may have been put in place to mitigate or prevent in the first place. We determined that the management team was responsible for a series of failures that, in our opinion, accumulated in an accident.
So then your findings that you just spoke of, those didn't include Ms. Gutierrez, right?
As an employee directly engaged in the work, she is mentioned in the report frequently, but in terms of who do we identify as a member of management, and thus who do we consider responsible, she's not. She's just an employee.
So what was, in total bottom line here, the root cause that you found?
To summarize the entire report would be that Rust Movie Productions identified a hazard, a workplace hazard, working with firearms, and they adopted firearm safety policies, but they totally failed to enforce them, train their employees on them, practice them, reference them, nothing. They adopted it and it stopped at the word adoption. Nothing further happened.
To emphasize the fact that Rust Productions was actually at fault, and not Hannah Gutierrez as an individual, the defense cross-examines a handful of witnesses who are suing Rust Productions following the incident.
You've sued Alec Baldwin and Rust Production, but you have not sued Hannah Gutierrez Reed, have you?
Again, you'd have to talk to my counsel about who I've actually sued.
Have you read the lawsuit?
I perused it.
You perused it. What does that mean? Did you read it, all the paragraphs, or did you just read page 1 and just said, knock yourself out, lawyer, go ahead?
I think I got past page 1, but since I'm not in your industry, I don't understand what a lot of that is, and I trust my counsel to represent me.
And in that lawsuit, you're suing for a variety of things, punitive damages, right?
Again, I'm not a lawyer, sir, so you'd have to discuss that with my counsel.
Well, you know you're suing for loss of enjoyment of life.
Certainly.
Okay. And you know you're suing for medical expenses and non-medical expenses, right?
I understood that to be the case, yes.
Let me ask you this. Are you hoping that you can come in and testify here today and something happens to Ms. Gutierrez Reed, it'll help your lawsuit?
I'm hoping for justice, sir. Two people were injured on a film set. That has not only affected me, that has affected the film industry.
And you want money for that?
I want justice.
You want money? Your lawsuit doesn't say justice; it says money.
Again, you'd have to
for money. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Bowles needs to let the witness answer the question. That he's being argumentative. This needs to be a cross.
You are being argumentative. I'll let him answer. I agree. You're suing for money.
I asked my lawyer to help bring justice in this case. And if that doesn't mean criminal, then I would assume that means some sort of monetary justice.
The reason that I brought any kind of lawsuit to anybody in the beginnings is because I wanted change in our industry. I did not want something like this to be able to happen again to anybody else, to their families, to the crew that knows them as family. I wanted some sort of change to happen, some policy change, whether it be required to have a standby ambulance or it be required to have additional medics if there's going to be big stunts or big gunfire or anything that could potentially cause, somebody to become injured. I wanted that change in our industry because on that show there were roughly 75 crew. That is minimal compared to what I normally would have on set. I would have no less than 300 usually before I would be approved to have an additional medic to come and help me. That is just not okay. That is not okay. And being the only medic there with 2 patients, knowing my resources were not close enough to help in any significant way is what I wanted to change. I went home that night and I looked at my little boy, who's the same age as Helena's son. And all I could think about is how I could not save his mother's life and how he was going to grow up without a mother. And how her spouse lost the love of his life.
Okay. I did not expect this testimony.
Defense would argue that because Hannah had been hired into two separate roles, armorer and props, this was negligent on the production side, and it is argued that at many points during the shoot, despite management saying otherwise, Hannah was asked to focus less on her armorer duties and more on props work.
But after the first week, I got talked to by some people in production, and they were told that I wasn't really pulling my weight in props. So basically I was told that I needed to shift my focus less on armor and more on props. They told me, they said, yeah, we hear that you're taking your armor job very seriously, but we need you to support props right now because props is also struggling. And I was like, okay, I'll try my best to do that. And they said, we want you to step into this position, and we think it's a great opportunity for you. But really, I just got to do two jobs for less pay.
Yeah. How did you feel about that added responsibility?
It was a lot, but I'm super eager, and when someone kind of says, you can do this, then I'm just like, okay, now I have to show them, I can do this, So ultimately, it was frustrating, but at the same time, I was like, all right, got to go and kick ass and props now, I guess, too.
And you believe that Miss Gutierrez Reed was operating in two jobs in props and armor, and you thought that was dangerous, that production did that, didn't you?
I did.
And you felt it was dangerous, and part of your lawsuit that they should not have put her in those two positions. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, sir, you've never been on all of your 12 prior movies with armors, you've never been on a set where an armorer was part-time, right?
I don't recall ever working on a set that had a part-time armorer, no.
Okay. So this would be your first one on the Rust set where they had part-time?
Potentially.
Many of the witnesses would indeed say that it was quite odd to see an armorer hired into two roles, and they had never experienced that before. To further indicate that the production was moving at an unsafe rate, defense would go on to scrutinize behavior from Alec Baldwin.
One more. I forgot the recoil stuff. No, right away. Let's reload. Here we go.
So, Helena.
Here we go. Come on.
Well, I had to go closer because Annie did, so you want to...
Copy. We should have two guns, and both were reloading.
Well, number one, he's basically instructing the armor how to do their job at that point, telling them that we should have had the gun second reload, hurry up, give it to me, fast. This is that moment. This is that moment I spoke about earlier. This is that moment that you need to stop and say, no, I'm not going to hurry up, I'm going to slow down.
Do you remember at times Mr. Baldwin rushing people to keep going, reload, let's go? Do you remember that?
Again, I was shown a video where Mr. Baldwin says, let's go. I don't characterize that as Mr. Baldwin rushing people.
Okay.
I think I characterize it as an actor in his moment. I'm ready. Okay, let's go. There was never any Mr. Baldwin rushing anybody.
Okay. So you never felt like Mr. Baldwin was rushing? Okay.
None whatsoever.
You indicated that this was constantly rushed and reckless and chaotic on set, correct?
Correct.
And you heard Mr. Baldwin a couple of times at least rushing people and telling them to move, right?
I did.
Okay. Did you hear Mr. Halls do that also?
I did.
Did you ever stand up to Mr. Baldwin and say, no, we're not going to move this fast?
That's not my job, sir.
Okay. And did you ever see anybody else stand up to Mr. Baldwin, tell him not to move that fast?
I don't recall anybody standing up to Mr. Baldwin on the set of Rust, sir.
Wasn't going to happen, was it? He's running the show. He's the big boss, right?
He's both, he's the producer, one of the writers, and on the call sheet, he's number one. So, yes.
So wouldn't you find it difficult for a 24-year-old female armorer in her, as you call it, her second movie, with everybody else, grown men, not standing up to Mr. Baldwin? Wouldn't you find that difficult for her also?
I wasn't in her position.
With regard to an A-list actor like Mr. Baldwin, would you agree that
it would be difficult for a young armor trying to get in her second or third production. She's not had 100 productions. Would that be a difficult situation?
It would be a difficult situation.
Okay.
The defense really dig into Seth Kenney and the role he played providing dummy ammunition to the set, and how live ammo could have come from him. Seth's property is depicted to be a mess, and they allude to the idea that the man doesn't have a sense of control over what is kept where. But this isn't all that they bring up regarding the Seth Kenney situation. Defense would criticize how law enforcement never obtained latent prints of Seth, something which they believe could have been compared to prints found on boxes of ammunition, or even rounds themselves. This could have helped them prove that Seth may have been the one touching the box of dummies that Hannah was pulling from, and potentially have shown that he had touched the live ammo that was found on the set. Furthermore, they say that it took law enforcement a whole month before they searched his property. This would have given the man ample opportunity to dispose of any boxes or rounds on his property that matched what was used on the set of Rust. Regarding the way Seth stored his live ammunition, in a grey box marked live ammo, stored beneath other boxes marked as blanks, the defense would present an expert firearms witness of their own to provide his opinion on how appropriate this practice might be. As a side note, this expert individual was quite the character.
Okay, sir, good afternoon. Can you please tell the jury your name again?
Frank Lewis Blair Kuski III.
Where do you currently reside?
Carmel Valley, California.
Just give the jury an overview of your experience with firearms. And not necessarily getting into movies yet, but your experience with firearms and period firearms and how you obtain that familiarity.
Do you wish for the long explanation or the short?
No, the short. The short's always better.
My father was a combat MP in the Second World War. I was shooting almost from birth. I was sent to rifle camp in Butte, Montana at age 6, which is hard to imagine. I worked, was a member of the Kenyon College rifle team. Following graduation from Kenyon College, I took up firearms in a very serious way, beginning collecting and shooting. I was trained by Louis Tenenbaum, essentially right out of college, who was a member of the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit, who thought I was worth taking his time with that. I first appeared in the George Washington television miniseries in 1984, and I was assigned my role as a surveyor in the wilderness, and of course I had my first real flintlock in my hands at that time. This time, and I believe you have a nice picture of me firing cannons, I became a sergeant of artillery doing reenactment big time, and in that capacity I appeared in lots of movies. I fired artillery. This is 18th century artillery. I fired at the 1812 Overture with Cincinnati Symphony in various performances in big stadiums and things. I also sorry for the cough.
Okay, let me stop you for a second, because there's a lot of information. And,
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But I want to ask you, in the course of that, and you've had a whole lifetime, is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
You familiar with various types of live ammunition?
Yes, I am.
Do you store live ammunition, or do you have a place to store live ammunition yourself?
Yes, I do.
And do you have a place to store dummy ammunition yourself?
Yes, I do.
Are you familiar with whether there are any dangers of storing those together?
Absolutely.
And why would that be?
There are two sides of the danger. One easy to see, and that is if a live round somehow found its way in with look-alike dummy ammunition, you would have a very severe chance of having somebody getting killed. Now the flip side is perhaps equally dangerous, though less visible. If I'm hunting Russian wild boar, which I hunt with a handgun in California, and I go to shoot at a Russian wild boar that weighs 325 pounds and it's coming right at me, and the gun goes click because I substituted a dummy, I will be the dead one. So yes, both sides are bad.
Absolutely.
As their argument unfolds, the defense find a phone call between Sarah Zachary and Seth Kenney to be of great interest. Right after the shooting, Sarah contacted Seth, and following this phone call, she disposed of ammunition that was loaded into 2 guns that other actors were using. Sarah says that her reasoning for doing this was because she was in a panic, and seeing as she would often dispose of dummy ammunition after it had been used, she was on autopilot and not really thinking about what she was doing. The defense takes great issue with not only the fact that she had done this, but also that the state had given her immunity in exchange for her testimony.
Do you recall anything from that phone call? Again, not telling us what Mr. Kenny said, but do you recall anything from that phone call?
Yes.
What do you recall?
Just him mortified.
It was a very quick conversation, yes.
And your testimony under oath is that you did not tell her to throw any of those rounds away.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. But then she did throw them away.
I learned about that months later.
You then throw rounds away from the 2 revolvers that you had previously loaded, right?
I believe so, yes.
And you threw them in a trash can.
Correct.
Now, you didn't tell anybody at the scene that you had thrown those away, right?
I didn't tell anyone, but it was in a public place. If someone saw me, then yeah.
Well, you didn't want to let anybody know that, did you?
They weren't the rounds in question, so I didn't think it mattered, and I had honestly forgotten.
Well, you knew that somebody had been shot, at least one person had been shot, correct?
Correct.
Wouldn't you think that the police would want to see everything on set?
Yes.
So when you throw away rounds that they may have wanted to see, don't you understand that to be an issue?
No, because again, it wasn't the rounds in question.
But that isn't your determination, right, to determine what's in question. That is the law enforcement's determination, correct?
Okay.
And the rounds that you're throwing away could be possible evidence that would assist them. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
And so when you made that decision, was that in fact Mr. Kenny directing you to do something?
No.
You threw away those rounds and the 2 revolvers that you loaded. Was it your intention to get rid of the evidence that you had done? In other words, the 2 you had loaded?
No.
Furthermore, the defense believe that the responding officers conducted themselves in an unprofessional manner when they arrived on scene. Witnesses were not segregated, and in one instance, allowed to leave the set. These witnesses had opportunity to talk amongst one another, to get their stories lining up, and to make matters worse. Some of these people were allowed to cross police lines to assist with finding weapons, pointing out belongings of people, and more. It is speculated that any of these people could have moved potential evidence without law enforcement being aware, and they even had the ability to plant their own evidence if they wanted. All of this was possible because the responding officers were unable to gain control of the situation. The state does fight back and argues that there were only 3 officers available who all worked in a very small sheriff's department. None of them had ever responded to a scene of this magnitude before, and none of them knew what to expect on a film set. The defense would place a private investigator on the stand who reviewed the work from law enforcement, and to summarize his testimony, he would indicate that the officers did a poor job due to the reasons I just mentioned. This is something that the officer in charge of the scene would be questioned about on the stand.
All right, what's he doing there?
Yeah, he's reaching over the yellow tape and grabbing a round to give us an example of what a dummy round looks like.
All right, why did you not tell him, hey, don't do that?
I don't know.
As the scene supervisor, are you concerned that if this gentleman reached over once over the tape and interacted with the cart, maybe he did it again?
In front of Deputy Puentes, I don't know.
Okay. Do you agree with me that that was an investigative mistake on your part?
Yes, that was a mistake by me, yes.
Another key point of interest in how law enforcement failed was the fact that one witness left the set on the day of the incident before being questioned. This person is portrayed by the defense as the missing witness. Who knows what he saw, did, or had to say about the events of that day? Unfortunately for the defense, the state did manage to do a pretty decent job at proving who this witness was and why he left. The person in question is a man by the name of Reed Russell. During cross-examination of the private investigator, the state would thoroughly pick apart the details of this section of argument.
Didn't you interview Reed Russell? And when you interviewed Reed Russell, he told you that he left so that he could go to the hospital to be with his close friends. And before he left, he gave all of his contact information to the police. You interviewed him. Do you recall that?
I did.
Do you need to see a copy of the interview?
I don't.
And you also understand that Mr. Russell, who left the scene to go to the hospital, was interviewed the very next day by Detective Cano. Aren't you aware of that?
I am, yes.
So what's the mystery? Who's the mystery man that left the set? He was identified, right? Correct?
Mr. Russell was identified, but I was never quite clear if it was the same individual.
Even though you asked him and he said, I'm the guy that left the set to go to the hospital?
Yes, but did he know he was the only one who left?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. I'll pass the witness.
All of this led to a pretty heated trial. The state and defense attorneys would clash at many points throughout.
Do you recall seeing his hand being behind his back and coming around sort of shaped like this and then go over the tape onto the cart?
No.
You don't recall seeing?
Your Honor, this is Mr. Bowles testifying. Mr. Bowles is testifying because he didn't get the right information from Benavides. All right.
Move on.
I will.
I will object to the form of that question. It is completely contrary to the evidence that the jury has heard, and Mr. Bowles knows it.
Actually, Your Honor, I don't. And I'm asking her a question that's perfectly permissible to ask her. If she disagrees...
Ask the question.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, she does, because she was the one that prepped you,
move
right?
on.
Yes, I will, Your Honor. Did Miss Morrissey prep you, or was it somebody else?
Have you reviewed every word? Because you should if you haven't.
I've reviewed every word and I've listened to it.
For the record, can we get the page numbers of the transcript that are being handed to the witness?
You probably should have had those, because you looked at them.
I didn't take note of the page numbers.
Courtesy gave you her transcript. You can give her the page.
I'll give her the page.
It's page 28.
Sounded funny?
Yes.
You want
All right.
these-
You know what? We're going to take a break. We're going to spare you a little. All right. Please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about it.
Probably the better and more complete way of handling this is to review the transcript, and I think we have numerous copies of that. So, I'm not going to tell Mr. Bowles how to do his job. So show me what you're going to show her.
Well, I'm refreshing recollection.
I know, but
Sure.
show
And
us.
you show me what you're going to refresh with.
This is a clip, and so if you want to play the actual video that was entered, we can do that too.
Well, you have it. She's your witness now. You do what you want to do.
Okay, if you don't want to help us out, is that what you're saying? You don't want to play it?
Mr. Bowles,
Yeah,
you
I'll
have
play.
it. You have computers. She's your witness.
Okay, then I'll play. Your Honor, Chad's better at operating.
refresh her memory.
I still don't know what he's going to play.
Okay, all right.
Wait a
I
second.
have no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, I'm just
Wait.
gonna play
You're
it.
not listening to.
And I did notify Local 80, which was the union that represented me while I was making that movie.
When did you notify Local 80?
You'd have to contact Local 80. It was early in the movie, and I can't give you a definitive date, sir.
Well, no, I'm asking you. I'm not going to contact Local 80. They're not here in court.
He's already indicated he doesn't remember.
Judge, can I do my cross-examination?
Well,
Sure.
if you do it properly, you can.
I'm doing it properly.
Listen.
What are you saying, Mr. Bowles? Are you speaking to me?
Yeah, I'm saying
What would you like, sir?
we're trying to get to the truth. That's what I'd like.
All right, you all. You all ask your question. I let you have coffee. Let's focus here with our caffeine and ask if she remembers what was said to her.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
To continue with the defense's argument, fingerprints and DNA testing was not done on ammunition from the set, and it is argued that this was poor investigative work on the part of the state. Although, once again, the state does fight back, and they say they didn't do this because the FBI would refuse to do DNA testing on rounds, seeing as the chance of getting any usable information was too low. and the fingerprints were not searched due to the fact that the rounds in question were known to have been handled by multiple people over the course of 2 weeks on set. The defense next would pick at the state's expert armorer, highlighting that he has over 30 years' experience in the field, and although what he has said about Hannah's work not being the best is accurate, one could not expect someone at the age of 24, just starting out, to be as well-rounded at their job as he is.
And in 30 plus years, I take it you've developed protocols, you've developed best practices over that time. That's probably evolved.
Yes, sir.
So, sir, when you started, is it fair to say you probably didn't have those same practices you have now?
That would be correct.
Okay. And you've been trained both in the military, the police and the film industry, and over time you've developed those series of practices and protocols.
Correct.
When you first started out as an armorer, would you have held a shotgun with the barrel pointing in the direction of your own head?
I would not.
And when you first started out as an armorer, would you have permitted a stuntman to hand a double-barrel shotgun to a child?
I would not.
So those aren't things that you learned over the years not to do, correct?
Correct.
Defense puts forward the fact that during the OSHA investigation, Hannah was interviewed, and she stated that during filming, she approached 2 separate producers, one by the name of Ryan and the other Nathan, and she would ask them for additional training days to teach the actors, Alec Baldwin in particular, how to correctly handle the prop firearms. She stated that her requests were denied. The state puts both of these producers on the stand to get their perspective on how Hannah went about this request.
Do you have any recollection of a conversation with the defendant about her needing additional armor time?
I don't recollect that conversation.
Okay. And do you believe that she had that conversation with you, that it would be something you would have remembered?
I believe so, that I would, if the conversation did happen.
Okay. Did you have many conversations with her?
I don't believe so.
The main reason we've asked you here today is because the defendant, Ms. Gutierrez, testified at an OSHA hearing that she had spoke to 2 producers, one named Ryan and one named Nathan, that she had asked you all for additional training time with Mr. Baldwin. Do you recall any conversation like that with the defendant?
I don't recollect that conversation, and I feel confident I would.
To talk about the final piece of the defense's argument that I'll be presenting in this video, a narrative is built where both Sarah Zachary and Seth Kenny had motive to try and make Hannah look bad. Both of these individuals had separate personal problems with Hannah, and the idea is alluded to that either of them, potentially even working together, could have planted the live rounds around the set. The defense does say that they don't believe either of these 2 people intended for anyone to get shot with a live round. More the idea would be, potentially, to scare a few people as the gun went off, and it would lay doubt on Hannah being competent at her job if word got out that live rounds had made their way on set on her watch. Whatever their reasoning to frame her may be, they had the motive to do it.
You just testified that you did not want to that you did not want to fire Hannah? Is that your testimony?
It's not that I wanted her fired. She was doing a horrible job at props. That was an issue.
Okay, you answered my question, and I just want to know, it's a real...
I had mixed feelings about it, and I think that's why, in fact, I reached out to 2 common friends with Thale, saying this is the situation,
Okay, well, do you recall in your interview on November 1st stating she was just being an idiot? I wanted Sarah to get rid of her.
Collectively, yes. I mean, even now, frustrated with her, but at the same time, understand what she's up against. So it's a mixed bag of emotions, and ultimately was not my call.
My question was did you remember stating that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's what I asked. Do you also recall in the July 11th interview stating, well, I wasn't going to work with her again in the future? So you wanted her fired.
I just, again, it was, there were some mixed emotions and in the situation. If I really wanted her fired, I could have gotten her fired.
Do you recall being angry at Ms. Gutierrez Reed at one point on or about October 29th, 2021? You said, "I hope she's put in jail. This is outrageous."
I don't remember the specific text message. I'd have to look at it.
If I showed it to you, would it refresh your memory?
Possibly.
Now that you've had a chance to read it, does that remind you whether you said that?
Yes.
So you agree that you said, "I hope she's put in jail. This is outrageous."
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
During the time that you worked with Ms. Gutierrez, did you find her to be easy to work with?
No.
During the time that you worked with Ms. Gutierrez as her supervisor in props, did she call you a cunt?
Yes.
Was it around that time that you decided you might want to fire her?
No, it was just overall. But
what else about working with Ms. Gutierrez was difficult other than her referring to you as a cunt?
Mainly, I just felt like her work ethic wasn't the greatest. She wasn't always willing to help. In a year or two, she was...
Following closing statements, there are only a few short hours of deliberation before a verdict is reached.
We find the defendant, Hannah Gutierrez, guilty of involuntary manslaughter as charged in count 1. We find the defendant, Hannah Gutierrez, not guilty of tampering with evidence as charged in count 2.
All right, thank you. You may be seated. Let me get those forms.
At Hannah's sentencing hearing, both sides would get an opportunity to request what they believe to be an appropriate sentence. What absolutely works against Hannah, and you'll hear about it a fair bit in both what the state has to say and the judge herself. But whilst Hannah was locked up and awaiting the sentencing hearing, it would seem that she made a number of phone calls which were recorded. In these calls, she didn't have the nicest things to say about many involved with the trial.
It was my sincere hope during this process that there would be some moment when Ms. Gutierrez took responsibility, expressed some level of remorse that was genuine, and that moment has never come. Rather than accept responsibility, she has chosen to place blame on the witnesses who testified against her, me, you, the jurors, the set medic, and the paramedics who tried to save Ms. Hutchins' life. Her jail calls, and there were probably close to 200 of them, tell us who Ms. Gutierrez really is. And in the state's opinion, the content and tone of her calls demonstrates that Ms. Gutierrez should not receive any type of a reduced sentence.
First and foremost, my heart aches for the Hutchins family and friends and colleagues as well. And it has since the day this tragedy occurred. Helena has been and always will be an inspiration to me. I understand she was taken too soon, and I pray that you all find peace. I am beyond grateful that Joel survived that terrible day. My heart goes out to the film industry for the devastating pain that this tragedy caused and the old wounds that have been reopened. I am saddened by the way the media sensationalized our traumatic tragedy and portrayed me as a complete monster, which has actually been the total opposite of what's been in my heart. Your Honor, when I took on Rust, I was young and I was naive, but I took my job as seriously as I knew how to. Despite not having proper time, resources, and staffing, when things got tough, I just did my best to handle it. The jury has found me in part at fault for this god-awful tragedy, but that doesn't make me a monster. That makes me human. Thank you.
I just want the court to know primarily that she has felt remorse. And maybe I've talked to her as much as anybody, at least on the legal side, Ms. Cisneros. She's cried, she's broken down, she's had mental breakdowns. She said, if only, many, many, many times. And it hasn't come out. It hasn't come out until today because of the legal proceedings and the system we have. But she has truly felt remorse, and I will tell the court that.
On October 21st, 2021, chaos ended after the film crew walked off. Ms. Hutchins and others were trying to rig, if you will, how they were going to keep filming. And what was the defendant doing while waiting? She was loading Alec Baldwin's gun. Did she have enough time to load the weapon safely? Plenty. Did she load the weapon? Yes. With dummies and a live round. Did she check what she was loading? No. Why? Well, in her own words, most recently, in her jailhouse calls, she didn't need to be shaking the dummies all the time. Did she check after that? No. And while you've heard her concerns about how she'll never work again as an armorer leading up to the trial, have her concerns changed? No. Here's what she says. This whole thing has been a character attack on her. Just recently, in her allocution, I'm not a monster. On the phone, she and another are talking about how much of Hannah's life that they could take up, and that this is messing up her modeling career. This is while she's incarcerated, waiting for a sentence. And what does she say about the death of Helena? Hannah is dismissive of the judge talking about someone dying as a result of her actions. Hannah says she's looking at 13 months, which is ridiculous over what happened. Hannah says that people have accidents and people die. It's an unfortunate part of life, but it doesn't mean she should be in jail. A conditional discharge is not appropriate. And the second option of leaving you in the detention center would be giving you a pass you do not deserve. I did not hear you take accountability in your allocution. You said you were sorry. You were sorry, but not you were sorry for what you did. You were sorry for it and hope they can find peace. It was your attorney that had to tell the court that you were remorseful. The word remorse, a deep regret, coming from a sense of guilt for past wrongs. That's not you. You're hereby sentenced as follows. Stand. I am sentencing you to 18 months of incarceration at a New Mexico women's correctional facility. I find that what you did constitutes a serious violent offense. It was committed in a physically violent manner, a fatal gunshot, done with your recklessness in the face of knowledge that your acts were reasonably likely to result in serious harm. You were the armorer, the one that stood between a safe weapon and a weapon that could kill someone. You alone turned a safe weapon into a lethal weapon. But for you, Miss Hutchins would be alive, a husband would have his partner, and a little boy would have his mother. Please take her.
It's at this point of the video that I've moved away from presenting the happenings of the trial and now speak from my own more general thoughts regarding the case. All throughout working on this video, I tried my best to find sympathy for Hannah. I found myself relating to her to some degree because when I was 23 years old, I was starting out in the film industry much like she was. Young, eager, impressionable, full of hopes, dreams, and creativity. I know what that feels like. The industry is unlike many others in the way it operates. Each production is its own beast with strengths, weaknesses, and moving parts that can make or break it. Jumping into this world at the age of 23, I only wanted to succeed. I wanted to create memorable films and be a part of the process of watching creation come to life. I imagine Hannah might have been in a similar situation. She's existed around the industry because of her father for the majority of her life, and this was her chance to leave a footprint on the filmmaking world. I can't imagine she would have gone into that lightly, but at every turn where I tried to muster sympathy, I found some action of hers that fought against me. When I was first accepted onto a film set, I remember being incredibly excited. I did everything I was told, and I did it all by the book. I would ask questions along the way and made sure everyone knew what I was doing so that I didn't stray too far from someone's watch who had experience. When listening to testimony from Hannah's colleagues, her approach couldn't have been more opposite. She really seemed like a person that wasn't taking it all that seriously at all. To take these thoughts a step further, what I learned on set is that the armorer's word is essentially law. They trump everyone, even the big producers. If an armorer says something, it happens that way. The reason this is because they control safety related to firearms, and it doesn't get more serious than that on set. If Hannah had the same or even similar view of how armorers are to perform their duties as I did, it really boggles my mind how she time after time did things like not shaking rounds before putting them into guns, not performing daily inventory checks, safety checks before handing guns to actors. I understand that she's young, but it's just no excuse. The armorer role is no joke, and everyone knows it, ranging from tenured film crew to newbies like me. She wasn't starting out with her first camera operator role, or her first boom operating gig. This was the real deal, the one and only armorer on set. I can't fathom how this young girl didn't take that more seriously, especially since her father is classified as one of the most renowned in Hollywood history. Furthermore, after hearing the judge talk about Hannah's modeling career, I did find myself slightly curious as to what's going on there, because Hannah would express that she didn't want this situation to mess that part of her life up. I found myself wondering how invested into this modeling career she was, and whether being an armorer was just a side gig that she didn't care too much about. And oh boy, what I found was not quite what I was expecting, hey. It seems as though Hannah might have been working as a dominatrix who humiliates men for money. I found an article which talked about her ventures into the fetish of financial domination. There was a post from Hannah which had a picture of her wearing boots, and the caption says, "Love these boots. They're perfect for stepping on the faces of stupid men." There was also a text conversation that she posted with one of her pay pigs. The man would say to her, "Please, my queen, a little drain game. Take $100 from me, and when you do, I can transfer more." Hannah writes back, "I like draining your wallet, piggy." To which the piggy responded, "Thank you, goddess, for draining me." I mean, I don't know what to think about all of this, hey. It's a world that I'm not really across, and if all parties involved are consenting, then there's no shade being thrown from me by bringing all of this up. I just found it to be an interesting little side piece to the research I was doing. Getting a little more serious now though. If I'm really to let my thoughts get ahead of me, to be honest, cocaine probably has a lot to do with it all. I didn't present this information through the main part of the video, because the state didn't really dig into that element. But there were text message exchanges showing that Hannah enjoyed getting high after filming was done. Now if I put this together with her near constant trips to the bathroom, another running theme that I had noticed, and the fact that she would spend hours in her prop truck cleaning guns that never seemed clean, or checking rounds that clearly were never checked, it sounds a bit to me that she might have been doing something else at those times. And because I don't have hard proof that this was occurring, I'm gonna leave it at that. An interesting side fact, moving away from Hannah now, is that Alec Baldwin has also been charged with involuntary manslaughter, and that right there would be a whole other video. He goes to trial in July, about 2 months away from the making of this video, and I'd be very interested in seeing the finite details regarding the state's case against him. I'm moving my attention to Helena Hutchins now. I've managed to dig up quite a lot of information on this woman, along with a number of victim impact statements. To summarize it down, she sounded like one of those people that creates opportunities for themselves in the best way possible, then tries to help everyone that they know and love to rise with them. She was born in Ukraine and raised on a Soviet military base in the Arctic Circle. As Helena grew into a young adult, she would make her way to America, but her family stayed behind. She studied to become an investigative journalist, and worked on British documentary productions before studying cinematography. Over time, Helena would continue to rise in the industry as a cinematographer. She worked on several films, and one actor who worked with her would say, quote, "I was so lucky to have Helena as my director of photography. She was an absolutely incredible talent and a great person. She had such an eye and a visual style. She was the kind of cinematographer that you wanted to see succeed because you wanted to see what she could pull off next. There was no amount of pressure she couldn't handle. She was a great collaborator and an ally to anyone in front of her camera. Everyone who knew her was rooting for her. Helena was not only her work successes and achievements, but a loving mother and wife. She met her husband Matt in 2005 in the South Carolina University. Matt saw her and asked for her number, but she didn't have a telephone, so he gave her his work address, and she visited him there. They were dating shortly after. Their young son was incredibly attached to his mother. It is reported that when she was working on the set of Rust, she would call home every night and speak to him. They would get on video, and she would reassure him. She would give him kisses. And this helped the young boy fall asleep, knowing that she was thinking about him. I could go on for quite some time regarding who Helena is, based on the countless ripples she's left all over the world. For now though, I'll end this video with words from some of the people who are closest to her.
And the world lost not only a person that was a gifted artist, but a truly kind and compassionate person, which often seem to be in short supply these days. As for myself, the last 2.5 years are difficult to put into words. What it's done to me and the burdens it's placed on me, both emotionally and physically, are my private burdens, and I think I'll choose to keep them that way today. What I will say is that one moment the world made sense, and the next moment it didn't, and it still doesn't, and I don't know if it ever will again. So again, what I really want, I can't have. I want everyone damaged by Miss Reed's failures that day to find peace. I want this whole thing not to have been consumed by the world as some sick form of mass entertainment. I want to still believe in the better angels of our nature. I want the pain to go away. I want to be who I was before this happened, and above all, I want Helena to be back home with her husband and son in the house she never got to live in. Helena not only had an incredible talent for her art, but she had a talent for life. She was a touchstone for all who knew her, and those of us who were lucky enough to have shared in her fleeting time on this planet are better for it. Thank you.
The last time we spoke was the day before Russ started shooting. I called her because a friend of mine gifted me 4 tickets to Disneyland that would expire by the end of the year. And I thought it would be a really nice gesture to invite Helena and her boys to the park for the day. She seemed excited about going to the park. She hadn't been in a while and felt it could be a good break after the shoot. She mentioned pre-production had been a bit hectic and stressful, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary in the independent film world. I've since begun to question what is and isn't normal, and what should be happening and shouldn't. But I was fresh off my own low-budget feature experience and had a bit of the blues regarding some of my own challenges with that shoot. I confided my doubts in my career with her, my insecurities at the moment. Just another bout of imposter syndrome. She got called to a last-minute meeting. She had to go. Emmy, you're so young and so talented. I have no doubt that you'll make it in this industry. I believe in you. I believe you're an amazing cinematographer in person. Please remember that. Gotta go. We'll talk soon. Love you. Those were the last 4 words she ever said to me. I believe in you. Those 4 words will forever echo in my soul. They're a bright light in the darkness of this whole situation. They keep me going when times get tough, and times have been tough. I sat alone in the darkness of my apartment for hours, sobbing uncontrollably. My wonderful, generous, adventurous friend was gone. Killed on a set because a live bullet that wasn't a prop gun. It dawned on me. Someone didn't do their job right. A lot of someones didn't do their job right. I'm also a director of photography. I trained at the same school, graduated the same year, got the same degree. We belong to the same organizations, went to the same networking events, pursue the art of visual storytelling with the same passion. I've been on sets with guns. I've been on sets where blanks were fired at my camera. I know what an armorer's job is. I know the safety procedures that must be followed. And as more and more details of the case came out, it boggled my mind how many of these procedures had been either blatantly disregarded or not followed at all. Helena's death is the result of a massive system failure, where many links of the chain were loose or faulty, and they all failed her, all of them. But it all boils down to a very simple question. Why was there a live bullet on set? A live bullet should never have made this way onto the set, let alone the gun. Full stop. And that is where Hannah Gutierrez Reed, as the armorer on Rust, failed Helena. It was her job to check the guns, check the bullets, and make sure that the set was safe. There are people that leave an indelible mark on your soul, an imprint that can never be erased. And the memory of her wit, her kindness, and her unwavering belief in me are permanently etched into mine. She always had my back, and I promised her that I would always continue to have hers. Thank you.
Justice must prevail. And I would like to say also that Olga and Svetlana made these videos despite the fact that where they live in Ukraine, in Kyiv, they are being bombed every single day. This is the video of Olga.
Хаченко, мене звуть Ольга. Сьогодні я хотіла б вам розказати про свою доньку, яка була дуже талановита, гарна, дуже гарно вчилась, дуже добре до нас ставилась. Я пам'ятаю той день, коли її не стало. Мені дуже тяжко. Дуже тяжко без неї. Я не можу. Ой. Так. В університеті, потім вона родила гарного хлопчика, мого внука, перевернула все моє життя. Дуже тяжко дивитися, як дитина росте без матері. Я бачила, як Андрос підростає, як він на неї дуже схожий. Оля дуже нас всіх любила. Вона завжди говорила: мама, я хочу, щоб ви жили краще. Весь час вона мене прилишала до себе. Вона хотіла, щоб я була поруч. Кращого друга, ніж Галя, в мене не було. Могла поділитися зі мною усім. У неї дуже гарна сім'я була. Але цей день перевернув все життя. Мені дуже важко без неї. Я весь час чекаю, коли я з нею зустрінусь. Коли Галя загинула, було 3 години ночі у нас. Я не могла заснути, я до 3 ночі не спала, мені було дуже тривожно. А в 3 часа я побачила, що дзвонить мед. Я дуже перелякалася, значить, щось случилось, бо вночі вони ніколи мені не дзвонили. І він не міг довго сказати, що сталося. Він тільки сказав: мама, у нас біда. І хвилин 5 він не міг сказати. Я кажу: да говори вже, що сталося? Каже: Галі немає. того я не пам'ятаю нічого. Я була одна вдома. Я кричала. Я йому ще говорю, може ще не ясно, може ще все буде добре. Але він мені сказав, що її немає. Дуже важко втрачати дітей. Це словами не передати. І час не допомагає. Пройшло 2,5 роки. А мені стає ще гірше. Якщо перший рік я ще думала, ждала, що вона приїде. А цей рік я себе настраювала, пробувала змиритися з тим, що сталося. Але, напевно, я слабка. Хоча Галя казала, що ти мама сильна. Ну, в мене не виходить. Я хочу сказати, що мені легше не стане від того, що когось засудять. На скільки років, це не має значення. Мені дуже хотілося, щоб до мене хтось підійшов, мені поспівчував, вибачився, подивився просто в очі, мені хотілося подивитись тим людям. Може, мені було б легше. Але ніхто не підійшов. Я була на похоронах. Я їздила в минулому році, в жовтні місяці. Але я, кроме Галіних друзів, нікого не бачила. І боляче. Люди, які винуваті, вони навіть не підійшли до матері. Ніхто до мене не підходив, ніхто не вибачався, ніхто не співчував.
Це був мій друг. Це було моє натхнення у якомусь сенсі, бо коли мені ставало якось зле, я завжди думала, ось у тебе сестра така крута. Їй завжди було пофіг на усі проблеми, вона йшла вперед завжди. Тобто ця цілеспрямованість, вона завжди так надихала. І мені здається, не тільки мене, бо вона така взагалі була світла людина. І я навіть не можу сказати жодної поганої або мінусової характеристики дати їй, ніяк, чесно. Не тому, що вона моя сестра, а просто вона така людина. Вона була дуже крута. Сестра в мене, так, була для мене прикладом. Багато в чому, до речі. Вона мені багато чого пояснювала, і у плані виховання, мені здається, що вона навіть більше мені дала. То була така моя мрія, щоб дітки разом гралися, щоб вогонь горів, і всі так за столом, і ми разом, і щоб це було так тепло. Я розумію, що цього вже ніколи не буде. Я не можу. Мені треба, я не знаю, втекти. Фух. Короче, это я не хотела реветь. Просто одно дело, когда ты говоришь, какая она классная, другое дело, когда ты понимаешь, и все. Я взагалі намагалася триматися якомога